Yeah, so, yeah, my name is Eddie. I represent a Pan-African organization called Music in Africa. We essentially operate across the continent. We are an NGO, and so our work is primarily to develop the African music space. A lot of our work is around research. We run quite a multifaceted platform called musicinafrica.net, where you find essentially information about the African music space. We provide, free services to artists to help them put their information, create marketable identities online, that kind of thing. But more importantly, we've become quite a big source or resource for opportunities for musicians. So those who know our website will know that every week we are sending updates. Where are the funding opportunities? Where are the auditions? Where are the calls for residencies? Those kind of things. I mean, our value really is to help musicians move from point A to point B. And that desire over the years has taken us also into developing real projects where we provide funding, for example, to organizations, to artists, mobility support, that kind of thing. So I was here last year for the first time, and at that point we just launched quite a big research that we did, which is called Revenue Streams for African Musicians. And that one was particularly focusing on South Africa. So it was actually the streams that are working for music professionals in South Africa. And there were quite a number of reasons why we did that. And one of them was the realization of the fact that our industry is still largely informal. So we need to play a role to get into the spaces and find important data and to present it to artists so they can make informed decisions. But in any case, today, I'm back again, and we're talking about what are the trends in the music industry, what are the opportunities, the challenges, and obviously specifically focusing on Africa. This is an area where we are putting a lot of our investments in. As I said, we actually are running 4 offices in different African countries. We employ about 30 staff members, and about, I'd say, 60% of our investment as an organization every year goes into research, knowledge sharing, and information. So this is quite an opportunity for me and for us, and so I also want to say that, please, I'm not here to say I know everything. I'm here to share with you some of the trends that we're picking up on musicinafrica.net. It's actually our 10th year anniversary as Music in Africa. We've been in the game officially since 2013, but we started out in 2012. And we're running this website, which is amazing, in English and in French. There's quite a lot of interesting things that you find there. First thing I want to talk about is just the source where I got some of the information I'm going to be sharing with you. That's very important because I don't want you guys to say I was giving you information that is not accurate and correct. Largely, I still think that this information is indicative. It's not the absolute figures, of course. And this speaks to one of the biggest challenges we actually have as a continent, just how difficult it is to find data about Africa. And even though I have tried and with my colleagues we've put together this presentation, we still struggle to find a lot of the basic information about Africa. The information that you find easily about any other market in Africa is such a big problem. So you've got here, of course, the report from the IFPI, which is quite a standard, and it's good to see that for the first time in recent years, they're actually starting to really put sub-Saharan Africa on the map, which is quite interesting. And then the research I spoke about, revenue streams for music creators in South Africa. That's something we did as Music in Africa about 18 months ago. And it's still quite relevant. Of course, the CSEC Global Collections Report, and today I'm sharing information from their 2021 analysis. So they're actually working on the latest one, which will be coming, I think, in the next 3 months. Then, of course, I think something that is quite inspiring is to see what Spotify is doing with loud and clear initiative. So for those who don't know this platform, Spotify actually took the initiative to develop another portal where they are pushing this information, the reports and the figures, which I think is quite encouraging, because one of the biggest things we've been talking about is how artists feel that they are starved when it comes to transparency. They don't know where the money is coming from. They don't know what to do when they receive these figures. So Spotify has been pushing this, and I believe we've got some guys from Spotify here, and it's such an amazing thing to see, because they are one of the first people to actually start doing this for Africa. Actually, I'm going to be talking a lot about some of the findings that they are sharing with us there. One thing that was quite interesting for me when I was looking at this is the number that you see on stage right now, and that's just the massive data change that we're seeing. Saying 100,000 tracks are released daily and are pushed onto these DSPs every day, and that's massive. I think this number was 70,000 just less than 2 years ago. So saying in the past 24 months, this has climbed up to the hundreds. What this means is, of course, the industry is growing globally, but I think it comes with massive opportunities and challenges. And for Africa as an emerging territory, and a lot of our systems, we know our CMOs and our artists and our capacities, I think the biggest challenge is grappling with utilizing this data. And to artists, the competition is getting, much complicated than it was. Someone in my office yesterday said, I think about around the 60s, 5,000 songs, so 5,000 albums is what like a market like the United States of America would produce. That's 5,000. The whole year, 5,000 albums, possibly. But now, every day, there's just such a huge amount of data that's being pushed. And we know that this data is going to come back to our offices. When I say offices, I mean the CMOs. They're going to have to process some of this data, and they're going to have to allocate, and they're going to have to distribute. But this just speaks to the growth of this space. So if you actually do your math, you see that that's 36 million tracks in a year, right? 36 million tracks that are just coming in. And I think that speaks to the competition that we are starting to see. For an artist, it means, of course, we are always saying the space is much more open to artists, to indies, and everyone can do it. But we also don't acknowledge how difficult it has become, because every minute new stuff is coming out. And when you look at this number also, there are artists, there are tracks that are backed by huge budgets. So what does it take for an artist in Malawi to make it? So these are some of the dynamics. And what it speaks to is where the challenge and the premium is being placed on the artist side and on our systems and our infrastructure. But also, referring now to the IFPI, that report I just mentioned in the beginning, there has been this, of course, desire to see the numbers growing, especially the subscriber numbers. And these numbers are growing, just under 590 million, 590 million, which is quite massive if you think about where we were in 2017. So there is growth, and we all know that Spotify is still the biggest player, taking up to 30%, I think around 30% of that share. And Africa, in terms of these numbers, this is where it gets interesting, because we're looking at 590, 589. But Africa, I think it's still around 38 million users. And in South Africa, I think the number is around 4 million. And someone was talking about why is it that 1 million streams in Africa cost way less than in other markets? And I think that's quite a complex space. That's something we can spend quite a lot of time just talking about. But I think one wish is that we continue to push the value of the streams on the continent. And I wonder what this means for the players and what is being done and how this looks for the future. But those are the interesting also stats that you see that some of the biggest artists on the continent, and we're pushing big numbers, as long as they are not getting those fans and listeners from other markets, they are always going to be earning less and less compared to other artists in developed markets. So what is the overview? The overview, I think we already know that streaming has changed the game. Streaming has taken the biggest share, sitting at around 67%. This is 2022 figures. What is interesting there is, of course, also just that split between the ad-supported streams and the subscriber-based numbers. But I think we're also not surprised to see downloads going lower and lower every year. And I think it just shows us that that model is possibly on its way out for good. Just a disclaimer that this is on recorded music, so of course it's specific to that. And you can actually see this on this view, which shows you just over, the past decade or so, what's been happening. And you can see the red line is the physical market, how the physical market is going lower and lower. And since around 2008, there we started seeing the introduction of streaming. And guess where streaming is? It is the biggest. And of course, the future is definitely streaming. It's one of the biggest drivers that we've seen, and that is not going to change. So what does this say about sub-Saharan Africa? And again, I'm referring to the latest reports that we've been looking at. And so sub-Saharan Africa is actually the fastest growing market according to these figures. And what they show us is that it's the only market that has managed to push beyond the 30% growth mark, actually garnering 34%. And that's faster than any other market. I was looking for the actual numbers. I could not find the actual numbers. So those in the room who've got the numbers, please give us the numbers. And these are some of the limitations that we see, that at the end of the day, a lot of the data we're getting is much more generic and indicative than it is precise. But this is the message, and I don't think this is anything that we are just learning now. We've always known that there is great potential in Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, the MENA region, we see what's happening there as well. What is interesting for me there is that this growth in sub-Saharan Africa is actually being pushed by South Africa. So South Africa accounts for, I think, over 70% of this growth. And that's quite interesting in terms of what is happening in South Africa and what is the potential for musicians in South Africa. Let's look a little bit at South Africa and focus on Amapiano, for example. So this is, I think, at the moment, one of the most recognizable urban genres in Africa at the moment. Probably Amapiano, Afrobeats, and a little bit of bongo flavor there in Tanzania. So Amapiano, according to Spotify, who again, I think we should just like really acknowledge this. If every music store was doing this, then I think we get closer to actually understand what's happening. But according to Spotify, 1.9 billion streams were garnered by Amapiano in a space of 12 months in 2022. And that got 200 million revenue for musicians, and those are Amapiano artists and producers. And what is interesting there is that they are saying over 25% of the artists who generate more than 100,000 rands, these artists are self-distributed. In other words, they are going directly to the aggregators, and they are pushing their music, and they're getting this money directly from the aggregators into their pockets. There's something that is interesting for me there. What it means, I think we've done a little bit of a research. It was not a fully fledged research, but what we're trying to understand is what is the average age for an average Amapiano artist? And that age group is somewhere between 23 and 26. These are kids, actually, who are getting, some of the kids who are getting this money. Some of the biggest hits in South Africa coming from Amapiano are coming from young boys. And what is common among these young boys? And she says, no women. Yeah, of course, though that's just questionable. But I think the knowledge and experience when it comes to the music business is very limited. And what we are seeing as an organization is that there is a lot of capacity building that is needed. This is the first time that a genre has gotten to these levels in terms of revenue. And the revenue, the primary rights holders of those hits are actually very young people. But this is also what streaming is doing, right? It's opening the gates to everyone. But when that happens, there's also a lot of manipulation that could happen. And that is why, for us as an organization, we're really placing an emphasis on educating artists. How can we make artists understand the basics of how the music industry works? What we believe is that the majority of artists actually don't understand how music rights work in South Africa. The difference between master, just talk about it in the studio, masters, give me my masters. No one really understands what that means. Publishing, sync, it's also a very complicated space, right? We all know this. And this is why I think the next steps, the industry is going to thrive on simplicity, education, capacity building, transparency. But we also know that in Africa, where there's Amapiano, there's Afrobeats. So I know that according to Spotify again, it's not because I love Spotify, it's just because that's where you find the data, and we gotta try to follow that data. They also released something specific to the Nigerian market, and they were saying that 40 million of revenue also went to the Afrobeats artists in the same year. That's slightly more than what they were reporting for Amapiano. Yeah, they were just saying the artists, they were talking about the money they've given into Nigeria, and that was 14 million versus, I think, just slightly less for South Africa. So what we know for sure is that these urban genres, these urban Afro genres are on the rise. And Amapiano, Afrobeats, the urban genres are pulling the industries at the moment. There is quite a lot of interesting things that they are sharing there on the Spotify Loud and Clear platform. And what was quite interesting for me is just this trend that the number of artists who are making more money, if you're taking 10,000 as considerable income, the number is growing. So that means more money is going into the pockets of artists who never could access this kind of money before. There is the opportunity, but it's not happening to everyone. I think this is what we don't focus on as well. I think the number on Spotify is that about 9 million artists have added tracks on Spotify. Now, in their report, Spotify say they focus on the 200,000 professional or aspiring professional artists. These are the artists who are earning money. This trend is not only specific to the internet or to the digital spaces. I know that at Samro, so they have got almost a similar situation where they're saying, although we've got a bigger number of members, a tiny, tiny bit of members make above 500 rand. This is why we're seeing the changes, because artists are also waking up. They're realizing there is a movement. The movement is you gotta look at your admin. You gotta do something. And so one of the first things is to call Samro. I want to be a member. Do the simple things first. And this is happening, definitely. That's why we see Samro is actually now asking for a membership fee. You've got to pay now, for the first time ever. You've got to pay to be a member of Samro. And this is something that is likely going to happen with other CMOs. There's a question that I would like to please ask that you wait. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Because I'm actually very close to the end. But what I want to talk about now is, what does this mean to musicians? At Music in Africa, over the past few years, we've been pushing this mantra: music is a business. This is the message to our musicians. The business starts when musicians actually acknowledge and start actively working towards becoming a business entity themselves. We believe that without this, the musicians will never make it. So what does this mean? We need a clear vision and a clear strategy. This is required from every musician out there nowadays. Of course, quality products and services, continuous self-learning. And this is important for everyone. I was speaking to some of the guys who work at CMOs, and they were telling us even themselves don't really understand things that they have to do. And that's true. People spend a lot of time talking to consultancies, asking things, and the guys on the other side actually don't understand what's happening. There are people, this is not to say the industry is not aware. There are people who are incredibly knowledgeable about these things. And a lot of them, when I speak to them, they say they don't feel that the other person on the other side who's supposed to help them actually knows what's happening. So what does this mean for CMOs themselves? That also means massive skills development programs in Africa. IP ignorance has been our biggest issue, isn't it, in Africa? And a lot of the problems will not disappear as long as this is still there. And that's why we always encourage artists to really be mindful, of things like split sheets, doing their own admin, record keeping, because without that, you cannot really unlock your revenues. Careful planning and analysis, looking at things. What we were saying, we had a workshop last week, and the guy was saying, I'm an artist and I spend 5 days in the studio. 4 days are for making music. Half a day is for my admin. And I thought that was quite clever, because a lot of artists actually don't understand that the industry is not only about making music anymore. It's not only about making beats. It's just about doing something that gives you an edge. A lot of artists still don't have EPKs in Africa. Huge artists doing big numbers, but they don't have a decent EPK. Music videos, when I talk about music videos, we're talking about those videos that allow an artist to unlock touring opportunities. And a lot of artists think it's the music video that shows you with flamboyant, things and all that kind of thing. But actually what festivals are looking for is just a simple video that shows you performing in front of a crowd. So goes again to that knowledge gap that we were talking about. Artists need to manage costs more than ever. I think we learned this from COVID. One of my favorite ones is actually building a team. Without teams, artists in Africa will never make it. Actually, music management is our biggest problem as an industry in Africa. It's either an artist doesn't have a manager, or they have a manager that is really not a manager. The trend that we generally see is that when an artist makes it in Africa, they get a manager, but the manager is actually not pushing the business. The manager answers the call, and when you're not someone they know, they either hang up and ask you to talk to them on WhatsApp, or you never hear from them. And I think that's completely, it's nonsense. So it's just these basics. I mean, how do artists just understand the basics of developing a business, nurturing, and talent and getting more money in the business? And all these things require some kind of, intentional capacity building that goes towards the artist. The guys at Summer were actually saying that one of the things that they have been talking about recently is that there's always this perception that the artists who don't know are the emerging artists. But for them, they've actually seen that the artists who are most affected by all these things are actually the big artists. Because what happens when these artists earn millions and they get into celebrity territory, they're actually shy now to come out, to go to these workshops, to admit that they actually don't know. So I think they're actually trying to work around how do we make these guys who are actually earning money from us actually understand how the industry works. Because those are guys who are most vulnerable. They're actually getting the money, but they do not understand where the money is coming from or what is required from them. That's why we see a lot of the CMOs still have a lot of money that they have not been able to send to artists because either the banking information has changed or the data hasn't been submitted. The songs, some of the biggest songs on radio, are actually not at all notified with the CMOs. But like a basic manager will understand that's the first thing you do because that's where the money is coming from. Collaboration is going to be key, and I think we are seeing that not only at an artist level, but industry level. Networking, effective marketing, building brands, fully utilizing these platforms that we've got, TikTok and the likes. They're opening a whole new world of opportunities in terms of just marketing. Most importantly, diversifying one's revenue streams. To the industry players, the big guys, or just at an industry level, what are the drivers? I think innovation is going to be one of the key drivers and almost a demand on everyone who's working in this space. We need to be innovative. We need to understand things. I think generally for what I hear a lot from artists is access to back ends that are easier, simpler. Just understanding how much traffic am I generating, how much revenue am I getting. Those kind of things. I see a lot of demand for those things. And that's going to be placing, I think, demand even on the CMOs. Infrastructure development. As someone said, the growth in Africa can never exceed the growth in infrastructure. So we need infrastructure. And this mostly talks about the internet, accessibility, and all those kind of things. Internet is still, and data is still very expensive in Africa, unfortunately. And I think this is really affecting the growth of the industry. Research and intelligence. For me, this is an area where we've got a lot to improve. Simply, it's difficult to actually know what's happening. A lot of the times people talk about Africa, they talk about South Africa, Nigeria, Morocco, Egypt, and a few other countries, but we don't really know what's happening in the other 50 countries or so. And I think that's a missed opportunity. Education education now happens to everyone, to all of us. I don't even understand how this industry works anymore. And there was Twitter a few days ago, now it's X. And who knows what's happening there? I mean, it just speaks to how things are massively changing, like at a massive stage. I haven't even touched the AI in this presentation. That's another topic. Yeah, last year we were talking about, what was it, the NFTs and stuff and all that stuff. We still don't understand it. Now we've got to understand what AI is doing. And it's just shows you how difficult this game can be if you don't know it. Especially to the artists who have to know some basics in order to be better than other people. Policy, regulations and all that, we don't even have the time to get into that, but everyone admits. In fact, I know CSEC, which is a federation for these collection societies, they actually sent out a strong open letter just around AI and how they feel the industry is completely lost without policies. Diversity, transparency, simplicity. When you talk about transparency, I think that's one of the key things that is really avoidable. We cannot afford to have an industry that is, because the data is there, and the guys who are running, everyone who's running a music shop knows the numbers they're making. And that's what we all ask for, transparency. Especially in an industry where the research is not so easy to undertake. Which brings us to the Music in Africa portal. I've already spoken about it. Please check it out. Spend a lot of energies on this platform. We earn nothing, zero. And we only are happy when we see people using the data and the information we put there. And access. So we are here at Fem Week. Access is a music-focused trade event. It happens in a different African city every year. This year it's in Tanzania. We'll be happy to see you guys there, bringing I would say, quite a big number of the global music industry to that country for this event. It's in November. Guys, thank you so much. Access, November from 9 to 11. Yeah. Thank you. There were some questions that yes, Ryan, and there was, so Stella. Maybe we start here because the hand was there first. Stella.
Just when you said self-subscribe to Spotify, I just want to understand, they have to still go through, sorry. I don't remember my question. When you say self-subscribe to Spotify, you mean that they are going through a independent platform to get to the DSP, to Spotify.
Yeah, exactly. So they would.
So it's not like they're going directly to Spotify.
Yeah, no,
they have to go through. So they're going through independents like TuneCore and that.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. That's what I'll need. I'll be the person that takes the mic around because I love it.
Thanks, Eddie. That figure you gave for the Afrobeats, do you know if, because you said it's actually funds moving into market, is that the earnings of Afrobeat genres in terms of royalties going into Nigeria, or is that a figure of Afrobeat genre subscribers within Nigeria listening to Afrobeat, or is it international subscribers, the value of the Afro, I'm not quite sure where that figure's derived.
I see some interest possibly behind you from Ninel. I don't know, Ninel, if you've got an answer to that.
No, we should definitely ask somebody from
Spotify. Okay, cool.
Where is somebody from Spotify?
Yeah, but I think the way it's been placed, the way it's placed is that Spotify is saying this is how much money we've paid to South Africa. If we start with the Amapiano story, they were saying they've paid 200 million to creators making Amapiano. And it was placed in a way that is not too dissimilar from that. And actually, it was not placed as Afrobeats, it was Nigeria. But general opinion is saying Afrobeats is pushing Nigeria at the moment. So that's something to read about. I'm not too sure about the specifics, but that's the figure they have paid into Nigeria.
So,
maybe there are people.
Nigerian artists' earnings internationally on the whole of Spotify.
From Spotify, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, morning.
Morning.
Just a question on my side. As a music compiler, we tend to receive and have a lot of music submitted, and of course, the artists themselves, as you mentioned, some of the biggest songs not registered to SAMRO, which can, at the end of the day, lead to problems as well in terms of them being paid their royalties as well.
Yeah.
And also having the information in terms of composer, producer, and a long list of other information as well regarding that particular song. As a radio station and other stations, they would need to have that information when submitting music and having the songs and going through a music committee. Are any of the platforms you mentioned platforms that actually provide that particular information itself? The other question I will ask to artists when they do the singing and songwriting task, but when it comes to the platforms you mentioned, are there platforms that particularly provide that information of their particular SAMRO information or particular unique code that indicates the industry code to their music, so that when it comes to the songs being submitted to the station or stations discovering a song that happens to be big or is going to be big, it can enable them to get that information, then enable them to also play it because they have certain quotas to meet as well?
I mean, I'll open it to the room, but I don't think there's any means or workaround that avoids the artist actually taking the responsibility and registering. Remember, you have to register a song simply with the CMO. And if you haven't done that, I don't think there's anything where that comes. But I think what happens, what is, I guess, two things that I have picked up is it's very easy to put a song on Spotify without having done anything. In other words, I can do it right now. And I mean, I'm with Dito, so I can simply put it there and then say I want it instantly online, and then it goes. But radio, you can still do that. I think people will still send to their friends and compilers and stuff without having done that. But I think it's also if radio is really starting to press on artists to say you cannot submit without that. And I think that, exactly,
Payola. Pardon. Sorry. Thank you. In a community radio station environment, it is easy for someone to easily say to a friend who's a compiler, here's a song, play it. So you'd find that at university, there's not really that much of a strict red tape. It's, I like a song, it happens to be big as well, people are actually responding good to it, it's played. With commercial radio, there's a lot of red tape that goes around it. It's towards an audience as well that take into consideration, but also to avoid corruption factors such as things like payola. Hence why there would be a music committee that needs to be actually in place for those kind of things and ensuring the artists get paid, So you are absolutely right with that statement.
And remember, like, the realities are very different. So I work in a space where I also at times get to understand the collaborations between South African based and those who are outside. It's amazing just how many people outside don't even consider spreadsheet. Like, I've worked with artists from Nigeria, big artists. They don't, that model doesn't work for them. They just don't. So you're always going to, that's why I think for artists, it's really now for them to understand what is important. But I think South African artists don't sometimes actually appreciate how much better we are compared to other spaces. And that just means, like, then you have to do the work yourself for you to open up yourself to receive the income.
And also having music to establish yourself as a business, because music is a business itself.
I think that Samu would be the last question that I'm going to need it. Just one thing for those people who is at 12:30 to 1:30, I think, talking here today, so I'm sure you can hear me. It talks about radio and TV monitoring and how important it is with new technology. It brings in a new type of technology and how we're picking it up, and how the collection societies may not necessarily be picking up all of that content. And that's why we hear these hundreds and millions of rand that are still unclaimed in the CMOs. So, Sibu, sorry, I'm going to ask you to be the last one. He's going to have a quick comment, and then we're going to take a quick break so we can get the next session. 12:30 to 1 is not at the time, just being introduced. Media vote, 12:30 to 1:30 is a discussion. Same place, yes.
Hi, Eddie.
Sorry.
Thanks for the talk. Quick question. There was a reference to 38 million subscribers to streaming services. Is that including things like Boomplay where it's device install, or is that specific to like Apple, Spotify, and the other DSPs?
I'm sorry, I would love to have a very good answer. I don't have it.
Okay.
This is just a number that, that's the problem. You get these numbers so often you just really wonder where they are coming from. But I do think that number is just about right.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, Eddie, just a quick one. On the say no to IP ignorance thing, it's one thing to know your revenue streams and to have administration and that kind of thing, but just a comment, because it's a big problem at the moment, is copyright infringement. So knowing, as well as an artist and creator, that if you sample something or if you remix something or if you're giving rights to somebody, make sure you have those rights to give.
Absolutely. I mean, we know the Papa Penny thing now going on, right? Huge song, huge song, but I think they're bringing it back, but it was put off, and that song had massive potential.
I think, yeah, so I mean, in a wrap-up, I think that's one of Gallo's biggest challenges, having one of the oldest catalogs. People are sampling at a quick rate without clearances and rights. So
Yeah. But if
you
I can
guys
just
are
say
having a
one
big
thing.
session coming up this week, aren't you? Okay.
So if I can just say one thing
Sure.
that I picked up as well, is just saying that it also is quite clear that with the growth of streaming, like those legacy artists, like the heritage artists, they're seeing also quite amazing numbers that are quite surprising sometimes, like someone like Lucky Dube, for example, really getting
Massive.
massive numbers. Yeah.
He still stands as one of the biggest selling streamed artists on the continent.
Yeah.
Surprise he is, yeah, so definitely thank you for ending that one. My favorite subject. Thank you, Eddie, so much for a very insightful, great morning, getting us off to a great morning. For those people, please, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and please come back, because a subject very close to my heart, and I know there are a lot of women in this room that are going to talk passionately about breaking barriers and shaping the future for women, what's next for the women in the music industry. And I think Rafilwe is moderating, and we have some great guests. So please, just a 5-minute break as everybody gets set up on stage and everything. We look forward to seeing you back here.